Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We're going to get a motion to go into the 53rd special session, please.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. First item in the special session, approval of an ordinance authorizing the sale of property located at 2848 East Baltimore Street.
Mr. Mayor, I move for mayor and city council to approve an ordinance authorizing the sale of city-owned property located at 2448 East Baltimore Street to 339 Unlimited Liability Corporation for the sum of $30,000. The sale will provide the opportunity for approximately $300,000 to $500,000 of private investment to create retail space for Hub City Vinyl and Game Room Garage 2. The sale will be in accordance with all terms and conditions outlined in the attached purchase agreement.
Second.
Discussion?
Just one note. I know folks hear me talk about a third parking deck all the time. And when I saw this sale motion coming up, I went back and did a list. You know, this is big building, number 10 downtown. That 3 years ago was an idea, and this one wasn't even an idea. It was what are we going to do with it at that point, if you recall. So this is building number 10 that has went from idea 3 years ago to actually in motion for reconstruction, redevelopment, and more importantly, reoccupancy as it applies to the idea of where we're going to put all these people once they do start coming and are looking for places to park.
I concur. Anybody else? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Approval of a resolution, execution of residential lease agreement for 38 North Potomac Street.
Mr. Mayor, we move the mayor and city council approve the attached resolution authorizing the execution of a residential lease agreement at the City of Hagerstown property located at 38 North Potomac Street in Hagerstown, Maryland. The lease will be between the City of Hagerstown and Lisa Forecourt, and shall be in effect from November 1st, 2018 to April 30th, 2019.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Carries. And approval of agreements with the Washington County Historical Society.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move to approve agreements with the Washington County Historical Society, WCHS, regarding the artifact collection at the Hager House. The incoming agreement refers to artifacts owned by the city that will be covered by WCHS's insurance. The outgoing agreement refers to artifacts owned by WCHS that are currently on display in the Hager House. The agreements are for the period from 8/15/2018 to 8/15/2023.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, out of the special session into the work session. And the first item on the work session is a proclamation for Fire Prevention Month. Steve and Doug DeHaven. You talk?
Yeah, that's hard to believe.
Never would have thought that.
Right.
All right, so the proclamation is for, wait for all the firemen to get up here in their purple. Oh, there's one guy out of uniform. All right. Proclamation for Fire Prevention Month, October 2018. Whereas the City of Hagerstown is committed to ensuring the safety and security of all those living in, working in, and visiting the City of Hagerstown. And whereas fire is a serious public safety concern both locally and nationally, and homes are the locations where people are at greatest risk from fire. And whereas according to the U.S. Fire Administration, in 2015 there were 1,345,500 fires, 3,280 deaths, 15,700 injuries, and a dollar loss of $14.3 billion with a B. And whereas smoke alarms provide an early warning of a fire, giving people additional escape time. The National Fire Protection Association reported that 3 of every 5 home fire deaths resulted from fires in homes with no smoke alarms or no working smoke alarms. And whereas Hagerstown residents should install smoke alarms in every bedroom, outside every sleeping area, and on every level of the home. And whereas Hagerstown residents who have planned to practice a home fire escape plan are more prepared and will therefore be more likely to survive a fire. And whereas Hagerstown Fire Department personnel and its volunteer fire companies are dedicated to reducing the occurrence of home fires and home fire injuries through prevention, engineering, and education. Whereas the 2018 theme, Look, Listen, Learn, Be Aware, Fire Can Happen Anywhere, identifies basic but essential ways people can reduce their risk of fire and be prepared in the event of one. Now therefore, with the support of the City Council, I, Robert E. Brucia II, Mayor of the City of Hagerstown, Maryland, do hereby recognize the month of October 2018 as Fire Prevention Month, and urge all residents to install smoke alarms in every bedroom, outside each sleeping area, and on every level of the home, including the basement, and to support the many public safety activities and efforts of the Hagerstown Fire Department in its community risk reduction campaigns. And that's for you, Doug. Thank you. We'll say a few words too.
Sounds like the chief has got to.
Okay. All right.
But this is for all the guys, the hardworking guys that go door to door and make things happen day in and day out. We help coordinate some activities, but they're the workers and they're the ones that really deserve this on behalf of the citizens.
Well, I know I see them out in the communities, that's for sure, and I know they work very hard at spreading fire prevention awareness, so we appreciate that. Chief?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted especially our Senior Fire Marshal, Doug DeHaven, and his staff is out on the street today, but joined by members of the C Shift here today, who are the ones flipping the burgers out there and making sure that people have working smoke detectors. We were out in the community all weekend, again at the Lowe's store, Vazel Boulevard. A little bit about the history of Fire Prevention Week. It dates back to the Great Chicago Fire, October 8th of 1871, when... Were you there? No, I was not. But we have a photo of you. 3.3 square miles, 100,000 residents displaced, and over 300 fire deaths. So we work tirelessly every day to prevent the 911 call. You've heard that from me before. And I want to thank Mayor and Council for their support of Fire Prevention Month. We view it as a year-round job, and as evidenced by our Washington Goes Purple attire today, you know, in 2018, it's not just fires, it's part of the all-hazard mission of EMS, technical rescue, hazardous materials, and being the community's first responders. So with that said, and if you'll accept me stepping out of a role just for a minute, most of you know that we lost the fire service leader Friday very suddenly to an untimely death. The president of the County Association, Dale Hill, his body is being returned to the community tomorrow, and we'll set forth a few actions to properly pay the respects. I would ask simply for a moment of silence on his behalf today. Thank you.
Let's do as the chief asked. Okay, thank you very much. Doug, anything else from you? Thanks, guys. Thanks, C-Shift. Appreciate it.
You want a photo?
You want a photo, guys?
Let's do that. What do you think we put you right here? In this space.
Right.
Gotta get the mayor in there.
Stay on the end. There we go. You're blocked. Stall.
Yeah, everybody's looking good. Okay, here we go.
You turn it over.
Pressure's off. Okay, here we go. Good smiles. 1, 2, 3. Let me get one more. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay?
Thank you guys very much.
No, yes, I did. Thank you.
All right, State Department Assessment and Taxation visit. Scotty. Melissa Adelsberger, is that who we have?
That's me, that's correct.
Hey.
Hi, everybody. As part of the ongoing educational process, as we begin to ramp up towards another exciting budget process, we thought we would start with providing you all an understanding of the assessment process as far as real property is assessed within the city especially. Melissa Adelsberger, the supervisor of assessments for Washington County, spoke to the management team earlier this year and really educated us on the whole assessment, triennial assessment process, the appeals process, took some questions from us, and we thought it would be beneficial for her to also explain to you all provide you the same information, and as we go into the budget process and begin those discussions, might have a little bit better sense of how the process is done. So, hand it to Melissa.
Okay. So we reassess once every 3 years, so a third of the county gets reassessed each year. When we do that, we are using a sales analysis, using comparable sales of properties to come up with numbers, which are then applied to the accounts massively, over the course of the account. At the end of December, the beginning of January, notices are created and sent to property owners. That notice would contain appeal rights on the back of that. They have 45 days from the date of the notice, the reassessment notice, to file an appeal. At that point, we would be set up for a first level appeal, which is a supervisor level appeal in our office. Basically, that's a gathering information type thing on both the property owner as well as the assessor. A decision is made based off of that hearing. Another notice would be sent. It would be considered a final notice for the first level hearing. They have the right to appeal that to the next level within 30 days of their notice to the Property Tax Assessment Appeals Board, at which time, if they do, they would be set up with a hearing for the board. They would present their side. An assessor or a representative from the state would represent the state, of course. The Property Tax Appeals Board is independent of us, so they make their own decisions. A final notice would be sent from that hearing. They have 30 days to appeal that notice if they're still not satisfied with the value, and they can appeal to the Maryland Tax Court. They can still, it's an informal appeal, represent themselves, and the state would have a representative as well there. The Maryland Tax Court would make their decision based on the findings, and a final notice would be sent from them. If, however, they're still dissatisfied with that finding, they can appeal to circuit court, but that's a more formal appeal, and basically circuit court would be looking at if the tax court did something uncharacteristic from the law. And I made up some packets that I did when Scott and I met. How many? 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Pass those down. Pass those over. And so then I understand from Scott that there might be some questions.
One of the questions I know that we had in our discussion was, as far as the actual assessment, when we receive, when we as city, property owners receive that assessment in the mail, what has gone into that particular assessment number?
That's looking at the comparable sales in an area, whether it be a neighborhood, a district, or the whole group as a whole, depending on how unique the property is.
So do you have a mile radius that you go within, or is it just a comparable sale, like how many bedrooms, how many baths, acreage kind of thing?
It's this style, 2 stories, 1 stories, split foyers, that kind of
So you don't base
thing.
it off the, okay, understood.
Does the permit information factor in?
Well, yes, if they, as far as the assessment value itself, like if we get a permit that someone's put an addition onto the property, we do go out, we look at, the new structure, whether it's what's been added. We do that twice a year, in the fall and the spring. And they would get an out-of-cycle notice, for that particular thing. If it's something that doesn't merit at least $100,000 worth of value, it would not be picked up till reassessment.
So I can put an $80,000 addition on my house and you won't reassess my
Until
value?
your reassessment cycle comes around.
And that's
What
only
drives
considered, though.
down,
No.
what drives
We
down,
still would look at it for reassessment, not just.
what drives down assessments? Because, we hear that vacant properties drive down assessments and all those,
Well, that
when
very
we
well
look at
could be.
assessments prior to 2008, 2009, and then we look at what happened after the recession, and we saw such a decrease in our assessed value, homes, is it just because of home sales prices? Is that
The
the only
market.
reason?
The market, yep, the market drives it. And we're playing catch-up too, because we only do it once every 3 years. So we'll look at the sales for that 3-year period prior to the date of finality, which, like the cities coming up, their date of finality would be January 1st of 2020. So right after, we're finishing up a sales analysis right now for Group 1, the cities in Group 2. The assessors will start going out and looking probably here in November for the city, to see what's gonna happen. And then we concentrate basically on that year to 6 month sales before. If we have enough of them, we try to get as many sales as we can. If we don't have, we'll expand that parameters out.
So, I think the biggest difficulty that I have with the process is it appears to be using a market and economy driven analysis to apply to a tax and operation, governmental operation process. And when I say that, so 10 years ago, state comes in and says, hey, City of Hagerstown, jurisdiction, low jurisdictions, we'd really like you to drop your assessment increase cap from 10% to 5%. And City of Hagerstown says, yeah, sure, we can do that, things are booming. This was 2003, and so 2003 to 2006, things are booming, and the state says, look, in order to ease pressure on the boom, where housing prices were going up like 13% a month the one year, we really think this is a good thing for you to do. And so the City of Hagerstown does it. A bunch of jurisdictions do it. The state never did it. It stayed at 10%, but we went to 5%. And 2008 hits. And I think it's important for folks to understand that, that assessable base really drives that taxable income, which drives our operational capability. And so we're not jumping, as a governmental entity, we're not jumping from a $100 million governmental operation one year to 120 the next, to 95 the year after that, to 115 the next year. We just can't function that way. But what happened though, and I think this is important for folks to understand, is in 2008 when things tanked out, and the city's at this 3-year lock of no more than a 5% increase a year, we actually went down 11.3 and like 7.5. And so it's important for the public to understand that we can't change that $100 million operation and suddenly over a year drop it to a $90 million operation. And as much as the state has a cap on that 5% assessment increase, there's no cap on the decrease to protect that governmental entity from that drastic fall and then having to adjust the tax rate, which is politically horrible, but economically negligible. In other words, whether my tax rate's $1.06 or 90 cents, it's still the same $1,200, to that taxpayer, because we're not really moving the needle on our operations. And so I guess my curiosity is if there's going to be those drastic changes that occur because the analysis is fairly market and economy driven, then there should be some protection that the state would want to put in place as it applies to the assessment caps on the reverse, i.e. the decrease, just as readily as it would be on the increase, in order to allow governments to stabilize that tax figure and minimize that political outfall, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think you're just talking to the wrong level of government to enact something like that. That would have to go through the legislature.
And
I'm one of the area supervisors. That's
Adam
a
Lewis.
legislative task.
In-
And the tax property article covers us. But you talk about a cap and the laws are specific. There is a constant yield. And really the political ramification is that it's your responsibility. We're only mirroring what the economy does. And the cap that you set is totally a city function. The state had no authority to make you. So each year you can adjust your cap rate from 5% to 6% or 10%.
Right, and I get that, but if you're using the volatility of the housing market within the economy, and especially over the last 10 years, if that's the measure, the metric that you're using, we'll never be able to provide any consistency as it applies to that constant yield. When I get that notice, I don't care whether it's here or the town that I work for, I mean, it's pointless to me, really. And it should be pointless to the taxpayer because, like I said, it's the same $1,200 on average per house, now that it was 2 years ago and 4 years before that, because that 5% up, is bounced down with 11% decline and then 3% back up and then, 4%. And so I guess I'm just trying to figure out what direction do you have as a department for using the market to drive assessment valuations?
Well, and I don't know if you wanted to chime in.
Like, does the state come in and say, hey, assessment office, we need you to use these 12 metrics, because those are the 12 metrics used, or did you just kind of sort of pick those over time, and that's what you apply, because that's what you've always been applying?
There's an IAAO, International Association of Assessing Officers, that said, it's an organization that sets standards, and those standards are metrics that are driven, whether you're in Fairfax, Virginia, Washington, D.C., ratios, statistics. It's a mass appraisal process. It's not an individual home appraisal. So the matrix, yes, is set and governed by our real property headquarters division that then would be applied based off the tax property article laws. If assessments drop, there's no matrix to buffer that drop, but there is a matrix within the law called the constant yield.
Right.
And your constant yield would end up, your tax rate would be up to get to the same level of.
But the tax rate isn't up. I mean, the rate as a number is up, but the tax rate as.
But we can't pass tax increases. As an assessment office, we're totally neutral. We're just providing a valuation service, really.
But if you come out, and I guess it's my curiosity, if you come out, like, you come out to my house, and excuse me as an average, you come out to my house once a year, or once every 3 years, and actually physically look at it.
An assessor, yes, comes by.
Right. And so you come out in 2005, and you say, wow, this house is assessed at $170,000. And you come out in 2008 and you say this house is $135,000, and that's about my number. Somehow in that 3-year period, without doing a single thing except improving my house, it lost $35,000 worth of value. Thin air value. There's nothing that's changed. It doesn't have less bedrooms or less bathrooms or a smaller yard or, you know, maybe a dirtier porch. And
More
at the
toys
same,
on it. I
Yeah.
pass by it every day.
Yeah.
I mean, but that happens in
You
the
know what I'm
stock
saying?
market or anything. I mean,
but then that puts us here to say, okay, we've now got to make up a new magic number for an entirely different volume of value.
I
And then have
think-
to explain to folks that, hey, folks, this number isn't any different than the other number. It may look like it's 15 cents different number, but it's really, on a piece of paper, it's no different than the last number. And that to me just seems so hokey.
You have an issue with the process, and we don't have the ability to change that process, but houses do appreciate and depreciate, lose their value over the years. Now, people do updates to them. We try to recognize those if we get a permit, just like someone was asking. If we do, if they've done an interior renovation, they could have done a total rehab, and so of course, then we're gonna change the depreciation on it. We're not gonna say, oh, this house was built in 1800s, but, it had a total reno, so we're not gonna have, 90% depreciation on it because it was redone. It's all market-based, and then indexes are applied based on that market of comparable properties. When an assessor comes to your house, what they're doing is verifying the information that we have, that things haven't changed, that someone didn't put something on their house, not take a permit out for it, because believe it or not, that happens. So we're there to verify our information at that time. And then we come back in, and in the months of August, September, and even now, we're gleaning sales, going through sales, seeing what a comparable two-story house that might be 12 years old, what it sold for in this neighborhood, and trying to place an index on that to apply it across the board.
Is there any differentiation between whether a house is within the city limits or outside the city limits? You say you're doing it a third of the county at a time. Does it take into account that?
We're only looking at your group when we look at the sales. We're looking at, unfortunately, Group 2 also includes District 26, which is the halfway area, District 13, which is Morgansville. But we wouldn't necessarily look at a house in halfway, the years even that they are there compared to what something is. Most of downtown, you have row houses and that kind of thing. You're not gonna find too many of that to compare with in halfway or even Morgansville. But we're looking at your group for sales. We're not taking something in Hancock and comparing it. We're not taking something in Boonesboro and really comparing it. But if you wanted just to see how things sell differently, I mean, we could do that in an analysis to see, is something selling higher? I can tell you, Boonesboro sells like hotcakes out there for whatever reason. You could have Ryan Holmes build a house in Boonesboro, that same model, put it in another part of the county, say halfway, it's gonna sell better in Boonesboro. They're gonna get more for it.
And it's gonna be assessed more.
Correct. Yeah, because the market
Because
is a
that's-
reflection of,
That's one of the
I mean,
things that
assessments.
the planning department has found is that a two-bedroom, two-bath rancher on Oak Hill, for example, compare that to a two-bedroom, two-bath rancher, almost identical footprint in Morgansville,
Location.
is assessed $30,000 more in Morgansville as opposed to within the city, even though they're basically the same structure.
But what if we move that same Oak Hill house across town? Like, is that going to change the assessed value?
Yeah, I mean, because what folks are experiencing in the city of Hagerstown specifically, and you can go through the numbers and see it, is, let's take the last assessment, on average, when I heard from folks in the south end, most of the folks in the south end saw a decrease. Only about 20% of the stock within Hagerstown saw an increase again, and all of that was primarily in, you know, what folks would define as the traditional north end. And so I think folks out there are saying, you know, wait a second, why is it only this specific small segment of town experiencing an increase when 80% of the rest of the city as a whole is experiencing a decrease?
And I think that's been explained, the market, what the market is. If people are willing to pay more to be in that north end than they are the south end, your assessed values are going to be higher in the north end.
Even though, let's say you take my house and a comparable size house in the north end, and you compare both of us to, like you said, 2 houses in Morgansville and halfway, they're still gonna get hit.
No, I said we wouldn't compare something in Morgansville to you. We would keep you within,
I think that was his question.
yeah.
So you don't take halfway or Morgansville, you just look at the city as,
Well, if we have no sales and we
Yeah.
need to look and we can see a trend of something moving, then we possibly would. But we're not like taking, I don't know, what's a new development in Morgansville and comparing it to Oak Hill, no.
I think it's also important, Melissa, not to interrupt you, but there's election districts within the city, and those groups are, everything's modeled and driven by what we call neighborhood code, where that you take a neighborhood, and for example, Hager's Crossing's its own neighborhood. You don't need sales from anywhere else. You probably got enough sales within that neighborhood. It's going to drive its own market. If you go to the north end, you could take Northgate. There's probably enough sales in Northgate to drive its own market. There's, in the appraisal world, and this is appraising, location, location, location. They always say that. So location's going to drive everything and the values. We only mirror what has already occurred. We don't set what has occurred. It's already happened, and now we have to say, here's the assessed value. If the market today dropped with a huge stock market crash again and values crashed within the housing industry, we're going to be delayed in getting to that because we don't reassess the city until 2020. People can file petitions for out of cycle, but the location of the north end through the south end, through the east end and west end are all going to be driven. If there's enough sales in that pocket, that's what's going to drive what the assessment's going to come back to. It really becomes arbitrary what happened in the south end and north end. If we got enough sales in the north end or in the south end has enough sales, you can't overassess somebody and you can't significantly underassess them. So if people do pay more for a property in one location, a townhouse could sell for $300 a square foot. If people want to buy them for that much, it may not make sense to us, but we have to then assess it that way because that's what they've paid for it, and that's what appraisers are going to go out if they go to buy their homes, and the bank's going to finance it. And we're not doing independent appraisals, but it's not going to. So that's why the city's going to have diversity within it. Just, I grew up in this area. There's places I would want to live maybe over top of other places, and that's what people pay for.
One other question would be, as far as the appeals process goes, we probably get upwards of maybe 45 to 50 appeals a year. Some of them sometimes they can be pretty insignificant, and they all are downward assessments. Nobody is appealing to get their assessment increased. Some are rather insignificant in assessment drop. Others are hundreds of thousands of dollars decreased. And I know that the appeals board is not affiliated with your department, but what is and you explained the process to get to an appeal, but as far as the actual appeal, the hearing goes, what are the mitigating factors that would produce a downward assessment award?
Okay, so if we have that first level appeal and someone comes in and they give us information that we didn't know, we don't enter the houses, so we have no idea. Say they had a wet basement and we had it finished, and especially now, like with all the rain that we've had, and it totally ruined that. And so we might need to remove that. That's actually a living area that was on that account that we would take off. That would be a big, depending on how much was finished, reduction. But it could be anything. It could be a correction to the number of bathrooms that we had. We took the number that was on the permit, but they decided not to finish that one in the basement that they had put down. So that could be it. At the first level, basically, like I said, it's a questioning type and finding information type thing. So if reductions are done at that point, since we've already done the market data, it's based on getting our information that we might not know up to date. If it goes on to the Property Tax Assessment Appeals Board, it could be based on, who knows, whatever they decide. Now, it used to be we didn't get a clear definitive note from them as to why they were reducing the values, but since the director, I guess, of the Property Tax Assessment Appeals Board, Kent Finkelstein, has addressed them to put remarks on that so that we know, because it may be something that we need to keep on the account that we, from year to year, that we didn't know about. But if they're doing it just to the market, of course, then they're just doing it based on what they feel was presented at the hearing is equitable to make a reduction. And then, of course, tax court the same way. They can make whatever reduction they want.
And that appeals board is made up of local county citizens.
Correct, that was picked, yes, by county government, appointed, yeah.
So the county commissioners appoint those individuals.
And then when I appealed my assessment, I think it was in 2006 or 2007, I based my appeal on properties around me that were sold. Took pictures, did things like that, sent my appeal in, and I got granted the appeal, and my assessment was lowered. You know, it's just very difficult, as Kristen was pointing out, to try to look into the future of the city of Hagerstown and where we want to be 5, 10, 30 years from now, and knowing that, you know, at any given time, you know, a recession comes, assessments, you know, bottom out, you know, and we have to plan our personnel, we have to plan our programs and all that, and it's just, I mean, it's really difficult. If the state could figure out a better way to do assessments, that would be great. But
I get to see this sheet every year, both for here and for Myersville where I work, where it's the constant deal. It's a single sheet, you know, it has the numbers and has the exemptions and gives you your evaluation at the end. And I don't know if you can answer the question, but what's the purpose of putting the number below that? In other words, I think that all the information on that sheet is obviously paramount in order for a local government jurisdiction to then apply that number to whatever tax rate it decides to set. But what's the purpose behind putting the actual constant yield tax figure in there itself? That sort of last bit of the equation at the bottom of that sheet.
You're talking about the actual, when they give you the actual rate that you would need to be at?
Right,
for
it
the
says,
constant yield?
city X, here's all the, you know, you do the lines and have all the numbers as the assessment at the bottom. It says, you know, the constant yield, it says your rate is, I don't know, 0.795. Constant yield based on
Is
change in
80
assessment
is
should be
0.08.
0.807.
Because it's trying to do the math for you to say,
To maintain.
as a jurisdiction, this is what your tax rate needs to be to receive the same amount of revenue as you have the year prior. And when you're exempt, it's because some jurisdictions, because of the valuation, don't have to have a public hearing then. And then I don't think the city of Hagerstown usually is exempt because of the size of it.
And that's the difficulty, I think, for us is every year then, like when we have an 11% hit in a single assessable year, and we have to sort of maintain that same amount, then we have to you know, you have to publish it, et cetera. You come out and then you basically say to folks, hey, we've got to change, you know, magic number A to magic number B in order to make our budget work. And folks, as soon as they see that number, gravitate toward a figure that doesn't mean a whole lot in the grand scheme of things beyond what you guys have figured out as, you know, the big assessable base number. You know, I think ours is like 24 million or some crazy figure like that. So I guess that last bit of the equation is what then we have to advertise, and then we have to sort of convey to the public in a manner that I think conveys it to say, you know, that we're suddenly changing the actual tax structure to
Right, even when assessments increase, sometimes it says you gotta decrease the tax rate. Because we're not allowed to, by law, to pass, we can't cause an increase in revenue, only you guys can.
Right.
So.
I get that.
For assessment increases or decreases, we can't then do anything. And it is confusing and the general public doesn't understand. A lot of this
No,
stuff
'cause then
though
we
is
gotta
tax
publish
property.
that advertisement.
You probably have to have a conversation with your county delegation to introduce legislation to change certain processes, because even what is required for the ad is in the law to say
I know.
this is what needs to be
Has to
done.
be this
And we
size
don't,
font.
we're not the lawmakers, we're the, we're the
Talking
executive.
to the wrong
It's-
level. I feel your
And
frustration.
all I'm saying is, all I guess I was trying to get to is there somebody commanding you to put that, is there something commanding you to put that last bit of the equation on?
It's probably, I'd have to check.
You know,
She
the
can
little
follow
number
up with
in
a
red, I guess
response
it
with
is.
Scott, but the law is pretty clear on what
Isn't it?
has to go in these ads and different things. So we could follow up with, and
Yeah.
If I could just put one more thing out there, so we keep you on time. This body deliberated last budget on the tier tax rate, where apartments were tiered at a higher tax rate than all the other parcels. In going through this process to try to generate these numbers, we looked at the classification code for apartments and then for everybody else, and I think there's like,
Land use code.
yeah, land use code is like 12 or 13 of them maybe. In looking at apartments, there were some addresses that came up where we know they were obviously apartments, and don't ask me what those addresses were now because I can't think of them, but I know that they were apartments, but they were not classified as apartments. They were classified sometimes as commercial, sometimes as residential commercial, sometimes as residential non-owner occupied. What goes into the designation of a particular parcel with a land use code? Is that voluntarily provided? Does the assessor, when they go past the property, do that? What makes that particular land use code stick to a parcel?
The assessor applies the land use code based on, and in this particular instance, apartments, we have a certain number, like if it's 3 apartments or less, it's residential. If it's 4 apartments or more, it's commercial, but it could also have a retail with it. If there's retail and apartments over top, that might be a commercial entity. If there's like 2 or 3 apartments, but a store underneath of it, you're gonna see that commercial land use as opposed to apartments. If you have something, I think we were talking about like the,
You and I went back and forth on one last time.
which one was that? We did like the C.W. Brooks building, and I did bring that information. so you have multiple apartments there, but they're not categorized as land use code of M, which is what Scott was used to seeing for apartments. They might be a C valuation, a commercial valuation, because in the first floor, they might have an office space. They have, that particular one is actually an exempt commercial building because it has subsidized housing.
Right.
It has 60
Yeah,
apartments.
there was another one.
The Alexander House, the first floor, we have retail, office space. They also have a cell tower thing, you know, antennas on top, and 95 apartments. So that one is coded AC. Walnut Towers, it's also subsidized apartments. It has cell tower things on top of it. So that one is coded though, M.
Because that percentage of the parcel that has the cell towers is taxable.
Correct.
Right.
So it's a partial exempt thing that we take care of on the exempt tab. Potomac Towers, that's also subsidized apartments, and it's coded apartments as well. So you're gonna have different codings, so that's why I gave Scott a list of what we call BPROC codes. And there's a whole slew of those, but if it has an apartment in there, it will have that coding on there. So there's dual things he's
Right.
been able to use to catch the things with apartments in them.
And I think I explained that when we went through the process, that the level that I could drill down on as far as the system was concerned was on that first level of the land use, was C, M, R. We could do owner versus non-owner occupied, but we couldn't go down any further than that. And that might be something that for the next go-around, we look to see if we can't drill down one more time and get those that are RCs or Cs that have a residential component, a multi-residential component to it, to see if we can, you know, make that even tighter.
I have two last questions real quick. The first is, under other programs, you list exemptions. So is it your department or function of the state government that determines those exemptions and how they apply? In other words, let's just take a religious institution that has what I'll call accessory uses or third-party uses of that facility.
They fill out an exemption application, and anyone that we don't have an exemption application on at reassessment time, we send one of those out. Sometimes we do the updates. So if they have where they are leasing or renting a space, they would only get a partial exemption for that. And that would be determined by our department based on their application and probably a visit.
So when you say that they get a partial exemption and then you make that determination, let's just say I have a building that's exempt and I lease it to a third party. Do you look at what those lease terms are to get an idea?
We try to get the leases and try to, yes, if we know that it's being leased. And that's why I've made an attempt to try to get from the city any lease that comes in, a copy to us so that we are informed, because Scott gets probably some information that we'll never get unless someone notifies us.
Okay.
Same way with permits too. Kathy's group sends copies of permit, I think, on a monthly basis.
Right.
Sends all permits down so that they know when there's been additions and improvements.
And then who makes the determination what all those exemptions are? In other words, and I'm just gonna use the church as a prime example because, a church may have a very different function today in some instances than it did, 20 years ago in terms of services that it provides, how it provides them, to what degree it provides them, and to what parties it may work with to provide them. I'm just curious
As to
who makes
whether a
those.
church gets an exemption or the use of the church.
Well, the various uses.
If it's not being used as a church, or.
I don't know who defines that. Maybe that's my question.
Well.
Like who in your department defines what those uses are and what those acceptable uses are that then can comply within that determination that an exemption would apply? So if
Well, the law would state if it's used for a religious purpose, then it's exempt.
A
If-
percentage of the time or a full-time use of, if you own a building and you have an empty storefront and a church wants to use that storefront on Sundays, is that now entire building exempt because it's being
Right.
used as a church? Or is it only going to be exempt a certain percentage of that assessed value?
So the church owns that building?
No, someone else would.
And just because the church is leasing it,
Right.
you're thinking that they're getting
That now
an
they apply for an
exemption?
exemption because now there's a church in that.
No, because they, to lease that space, would be paying something to the owner of that property.
Is that what you were getting at?
Or the converse
Or the
of that,
converse would be.
where a church then leases to a third party and the church is, does,
Not a religious function.
Yeah,
Well,
5 days a
yeah.
week, and then religious functions one
On
day a week.
Sundays.
Well, I'll take like, is it St. John's down there, and they had
The Montessori
school
school was in there.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was being taxed, the
Okay.
portion for the Montessori school, if that answers that.
Yes. The last question I have is getting back to this 5% thing, and I asked this earlier this year. So we know that there's, and it says here, 2017 county caps, and we have a cap of 5%. I'm assuming that there's a state law that says that at one point we were 10%. I'm assuming there's a state law that says we can't go above a certain number. I don't know what that number is.
I don't know that there.
20%, 30%? So 10%?
10% for,
Okay.
well, he's talking about the county though.
Well-
County's at 5.
Any jurisdiction.
Right,
cannot go
any local governmental
The cap
jurisdiction,
is
then the cap's
maximum
10% in terms of increase. Is there any state law that prevents us from establishing a cap on the decrease side? In other words.
I think there is a state law that says when the assessments are phased in and are capped at a 10% increase. There is no law to say assessments are phased backwards to cap to protect and buffer a decrease.
I guess that's what I'm asking is, can we as a government then say our cap is gonna be 5% both directions? Or is there any state law that prevents us?
I believe there
from
is a
doing
law. You would want to
I'd
ask
be interested in knowing what that
you'd
is.
probably want to talk to your town attorneys, and if your town attorney has a question, then the town attorney can call our state attorney general's office. I mean, I don't have the law book in front of me, but I'm 99.9% sure there's a
And I-
law that prevents an assessment, because people would be paying taxes on, it's okay to pay taxes on less than what your house is worth, but then in this case, you'd be paying tax on more than what your house is worth. So if you would want legislation like that, then again, you'd have to talk to your county
that's part of the
delegation.
I hear you using the word worth,
Yeah, that's
but
part of the
assessment
problem.
and worth are two very different
Yeah, but
things.
assessments, if you read, assessments are based upon the market
Market value,
value
so
of
really
a
they're-
property.
Yeah,
Assessments are, otherwise, the state could save a lot of money, and we don't need assessors or anybody else. You could come up with a formula to say 25 cents a square foot, no matter what your house is, here's your size, and that's what you pay taxes on. I mean, there's all kinds of methods
flat
behind it, but in this case, it's based off market value.
You just don't realize
Yeah.
what
yeah, I was
goes into
gonna
getting
say,
these
you
numbers.
definitely could sell it for more than what
Right.
it's
I
assessed
mean,
at.
obviously, it gets
I
sold
mean,
It gets sold for,
much more, and I say much more, but for more than the assessed
I'm
value.
gonna guess,
Typically,
I'm gonna guess there's a 30% difference.
I would
Yeah.
hope, but I bet you Melissa could run reports of how many houses sold over their
Well, I
assessment,
did.
too.
it all depends on what
That's what I mean.
location.
That's
it
what
all
I'm saying.
depends
That's what
on
we're
your
saying.
location.
9 out of
Over
10
the
times, that property's selling for more than its assessed value.
No, I'm saying our assessments higher at times than the sale price. I mean, it works both ways because we have to run ratios and statistics.
Yeah, and I did run off, like, someone had submitted some questions about Hager's Crossing versus some county
Right.
developments. And our goal is to be between 95 and 100% of market value. We try desperately. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes we don't reach that. We might be at an 80% of the value. Sometimes we're over and we're at 105%, because it's not concise when we're doing mass appraisal. But we try to be within that 95 to 100% range of market value. We're doing Westfields right now. That's what we've been doing these last couple months, because it's in group 1. And our mean is at 96.27% right now of the 37 sales from, and we just honed it down because Westfield sells pretty rapidly from January of 2017 to current, October 2nd, 2018. And I brought the list of the sales, and I have copies I can give to you. I mean, we're right in there with that. So, but that's looking at it. We've done the homework. We've adjusted according to what the sales are. And so we do try to be, like I said, from 95 to 100% of the market of what it sells for and apply that across the board.
Okay. Any other questions for?
I'm back next week. I'll try to get the answer to your question on any limit on a decrease assessment, let you know. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you,
very
guys.
much.
Yes.
Thanks, Adam.
Riveting information. Reconstruction of Pangbourne Park Pond.
Afternoon. With me is Keith Moore from Frederick Seibert Associates down the street here, consulting firm that is working with us on the design of the Pangbourne Park reconstruction, the pond reconstruction, and the stabilization of Hamilton Run. My goal here today really is just to keep this on everyone's radar. A year ago, for the two new members of the council, you weren't here, but a year ago we came in with some concepts for the pond where we had kind of a soft edge, more environmentally friendly effect, and got some feedback from the council, and we went back to the drawing board. We eliminated that soft edge in favor of rebuilding the wall around the lake, and also there was what they call a sediment forebay where you could collect the sediment and take it out. We've eliminated that, and Keith, I think, has very creatively redesigned the water flowing into the lake to minimize the amount of sediment we get, so we don't really need a forebay like that. So over the past year, we've been working at finalizing the design. I just wanted to go over with you again what this project entails, and just see if you have any additional comments as we finalize our design. So, I don't know if Eric can turn the TVs on. Excuse me a second. I certainly don't know how to turn on TV.
Not unless the remote's in my hand.
Yeah, gets up and turns it on.
Just have a few slides to show you of what's going on there. It's the same pictures that are in your packet, but for anybody else that would be watching. Thank you, Eric. So some of the existing conditions out there, if you haven't been out there lately, at the north end, the water depth in some of the pond is less than 6 inches. This is due to the sedimentation. It's the way the the inlet structure captures water from Hamilton Run. It takes water from the run, puts it in the lake, and then sends it right back out. But the way it was designed decades ago, it brings a lot of sediment into the pond as well. So that's why it's filled up. It was dredged maybe 30, 35 years ago, I believe, but it's filled up again. The outlet structure where the water leaves the pond and goes back to Hamilton Run is in pretty poor condition. And as an engineer, that kind of is concerning to me because that's basically a dam where that picture is shown. So if there's any compromised condition to that structure, that's something we want to stay on top of. Also, you can see that the walls are deteriorated. Originally, they were stone walls, something similar to what you see at City Park. And then they came along at some point and they capped them with concrete. A lot of that concrete's breaking off, and just aesthetically, they don't look very good. The pond had a system of drains around it that was supposed to keep the scum and the algae off of it, duck feathers and that kind of stuff. It's completely broken down, isn't working. So this doesn't look like this all the time, but I did catch this picture this summer that shows what it looks like when they're not, when the scum is, there. And then Hamilton Run is adjacent to it, and there's some bank erosion there, and we could make some improvements there to minimize the amount of sediment that's leaving the stream and our property, and that gives us some credits towards our stormwater issues that we've been talking about too. So what we're proposing is basically rebuilding the lake in its exact same footprint. We'd have a new inlet structure, a new outlet structure. We would dredge the lake, and we'd remove about 2,000 cubic yards of material that's in there. And we would do basically exactly the same thing we did at City Park. The county has given us permission to haul the dredge material to the landfill, where it's spread out over this large area. The water is decanted or taken out of it, lets it dry out, and then they use it for daily cover. So it gives them material to use, and it gets rid of the material for us for free. That's about, it's just a fraction of what we took out of City Park Lake. So that's in the works. The perimeter walls, Keith, do you want to talk a little bit about the wall plan that you've come up with?
Sure. So the existing perimeter wall is stone limestone block that's been just mortared together, and then at some point they had used like basically a spray-on concrete. It's called gunite to cap it and to seal the face up. Instead of going and retooling or pointing all the joints on the stone wall, all that gunite's basically spalling off and parts of the wall are missing. So we tried to find an economical solution there to try to reconstruct these walls. Doing piecemeal stonework is very expensive to put back exactly as it is. We looked at a precast concrete product retaining wall that simulates the same cut stone limestone that you have there. So it'll look like a new limestone wall in there when it's all done. These are actually, Ready Rock makes a product that has a pretty large block size. It's several feet in each direction, and it's got impressed on it, a textured face, and they can stain it to match. They have a default limestone color. Basically, if you just ordered their limestone block, it would come looking like a light gray with multiple dimensions, but they can actually spray on a color match, say, for example, the existing skate house there, as a part of that. The inlet devices and outlet structures are all built into this by the same, basically all integrated together so that they'll fit in, and it won't be as noticeable where those structures are, and we'll have a nice, clean, continuous look around the perimeter there. And it should really last. These are meant to be up against water, just like this application too. So
that rendering, it looks like they're blocks, but actually those are concrete panels, and that's the lining. They use the lining when they pour it. It'll make it'll look more like rock.
Yes.
Kind of cut rock like you would have in the skate shack there.
Right.
And then the other thing is we'll be putting a new sidewalk around the perimeter. The macadam sidewalk that's there is in pretty poor condition. So Keith's estimate for this is $925,000. It's not a small project for us. And the CIP is set up for it to be future bond financing. So I think Michelle and Valerie will be talking to you about that in the future here about upcoming bonds, but we won't bid anything. We're ready to bid, but we won't bid anything until the funding's in place, obviously. But it would be my goal that we try to get this done in 2019, if we possibly can. So with that, I just welcome any comments you have.
The existing limestone blocks, they're completely deteriorated, no ability to reuse?
You could, you could take those walls and get, retrieve the rocks that's in there and rebuild it. That would be significantly more cost than the system that he's proposing.
yeah, you'd have. I mean, that gunite's bonded to some of it, but not all of it. So you'd have to, really work at it to try to clean them up, make them look good again.
It'd be beautiful, but I
Yeah.
think you'd spend, I'd say 2-3 times what
Oh, yeah.
we're spending, easy.
We are doing some on the plans, we have some handwork that's being addressed in the existing stone wall that's along the creek. If you remember that one picture that, along the left side of the creek there, as you go look downstream, has an existing stone wall. And that's just gonna be repaired where it's missing pieces or it's got some mortar joints failed. But it doesn't have as much work to be done as the rest of the perimeter wall around the lake.
You couldn't take the limestone rock and put it there almost like in a gabion fashion, but to protect
Yeah,
it?
we will be doing that some in the stream.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that might be a use for the rock,
Yeah.
is stream
Yeah.
restoration, yes.
Yeah, it could be put in there, either as part of the stream structures. We have some, using natural channel design, some rock cross veins to keep the stream from eroding. And it could be used in like that or just as naturalization in the stream channels. Doesn't look like a constructed project when you're done. It looks more natural.
The hydraulics of the whole mechanism to drain or to get the silt out of there, is that basically recreating what is there, or is it a complete re-engineering of the process to keep it clean?
We're proposing a complete re-engineering to modern standards.
So it won't be a dam anymore? Or-
Well, it would still be a dam, but the inlet structure where the water's captured out of Hamilton Run and delivered to the pond, and then the other end where the water's taken out of the pond and put into the stream, both those will be completely rebuilt. And as I said, he came up with a scheme for the intake that I think will greatly minimize the amount of sediment, so that we won't be having to do this every 25 or 30 years.
Yeah. I was out there in a recent storm event when we had a fairly significant flow coming down the creek, and I bet almost all the water was heading into the lake rather than down the stream.
Right.
And so all that sediment comes up in there, and also that existing, it's called a weir structure that's there. That structure that's currently there is also, in order to get the water in the lake from where it is, it has to back up the water, so it's actually raising the water levels in the stream several feet in order to get it into the lake. So we're gonna try to pick up the water from across the street where it's higher and bring it in. Rather than backing up the water, we're gonna divert it off. So the sediment can continue downstream during a flood, and we're just sort of like a side application to get the water we need to turn the lake over and to keep the water fresh in the lake, but not reroute the stream into the lake, because that's where you're picking up most of your sediment.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
It definitely needs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that park.
Looking forward to it. Okay.
Thank you, guys.
To be continued.
Are you gonna be seeking out any grant money that might be available to help with this project?
We've tried. You can potentially get some grant money for the stream restoration, but no one wants to have anything to do with lakes. They see them, environmental agencies that typically do funding, they see they see lakes as not being environmentally beneficial. They warm the water, and so there's really no grants for lakes that I can find. But we have tried, we have actually applied for one or two for the stream, haven't been successful, but it's really a small piece of this. The lake is really where all the money's at, especially that wall.
Do we irrigate those fields with potable water? The soccer fields and things that are over
yes.
asphalt?
Mhm.
And that would be cool. If you could create a pressurization system to irrigate with the lake water.
Mhm.
I don't recall, did we try last year with open
Grant
space?
for that.
No, we have not.
Might be an avenue to try to
It could be.
see if we can get some from the governor
Yep.
and the county.
Can we ice skate on it again?
Yeah, when we talked about that a year ago, I think what we think happened is, it looks like on the intake, there was a way where they could stop the water from flowing in, and then when the water stops moving through the lake, and it freezes. So that could be done. We just have to
there's
work through all the details of that.
Well,
I
there's
haven't
a,
been there for a while, is that turn thing still there,
I
that
think we
chucks
should
the
be
water?
able to
No.
skate on it. Did you see
No.
the fishing?
So you basically like a I mean, like our raw water intake, where we have, you know, that right behind the weir, the pipe goes at the bottom, you have a valve.
Right.
You just basically close it off.
Basically the same thing. We have a sluice gate designed in this that could be closed off.
But that one probably had one that doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, right now it's not there.
Yeah.
There's no.
So I was just talking about, they used to have one that you could.
Yeah, the
that they
wheel.
could
Yeah.
Divert the water and shut it off,
Yeah.
back when I was growing up.
Yeah, it's not there anymore.
No, it's just a metal plate now.
All right. Let's try to seek out some money from someplace, open space or something. Thanks. Okay, next up is the beautification of railroad overpasses.
So I was asked to put together some concepts of ways that we could permanently improve some of our railroad overpasses in the downtown. They've recently been a focal point of some negative issues, so we were looking at that to see if we could turn that into a positive. So I just have some ideas here to float past you, and just to see if you have any interest in doing any of these. And if you do, then we can pursue it from there. So first off, just to understand what we're talking about, there's 4 bridges that pass Norfolk Southern Railroad and CSX over them in the west end between here and Burhan's Boulevard. Church Street, Franklin Street, Washington Street, and Antietam Street. Church Street is one bridge with very narrow sidewalks. There's really nothing that could be done there to beautify other than maybe painting the walls. Franklin Street is a bridge with 10-foot sidewalks on both sides, fairly wide, and there's one bridge that combines both Norfolk Southern and CSX. Washington Street is 2 bridges, 10-foot wide sidewalks underneath, but 2 bridges that, so it's a much longer structure. That's why some of these costs are higher for Washington Street. And then the 4th one is Antietam Street, which is 2 separate bridges, and then they have that 15-foot area of soil that is on the south side. So you have a 5-foot sidewalk and then that wide area of soil. The sidewalk on the north side is fairly narrow, 5 feet. So just some of the ideas that we came up with that if we wanted to do some permanent beautification there. The first thing would be an ornamental fence that could be placed and then you could also do some sort of lighting. I'll talk about lighting for a second. You can put colored lights, LED lights under these bridges, and I showed you some examples in your packet. Right now, what City Light's telling me is I have to have those metered, and you have to have them on both sides, so it gets pretty salty. But maybe we could work something out on that if that's something you really feel that you want to do. The other thing we could do is just have them replace the wall packs that are out there that are seen better days, and they could be replaced with LED lights. It could be a nice, really bright white light under those bridges, and I think it would make a significant difference.
But there couldn't be color.
I guess they could. One color, yeah.
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 All right.
Yeah. So the ornamental fence is one idea. A second would be to maybe work with a school to, we'd put up a metal post system and then have school art students paint on hardy plank panels and have them installed on here. Similar to what we did down here in the parking deck, the mural that's on the parking deck down here. The kids could paint them in their classroom and then install them in the field. It's a perfect project for art students. It would just take some time to get that together. But I think there is interest in the community, as Councilwoman Keller can attest to. The other thing would be kind of an off-the-shelf decorative panel. They make laser-cut panels that you know, they wouldn't be custom, they would just be off the shelf. That's another possibility. You could have a custom graphic panel cut. That would probably be the most expensive option, but you could do some pretty cool messaging there or something like that. And then on Antietam Street, specifically, in that area where there's the soil between the sidewalk and the bridge abutment, a couple other ideas. In addition to the first 4, you could stack gabions in there, or you could just put decorative boulders, like large river rock or something like that in I talked about the lighting. The prices are in your packet. I won't go through all those details. You could do different things at different bridges. For example, you could put the rocks under Antietam Street, you could put a fence on Washington Street, you could do the murals on Franklin Street, $35,000 or so. You could do all three, or you could do the same treatment to any of them, or whatever you choose. I just tried to give you options. Jerry, you want to have anything else to say?
And part of what we looked at is from the CEPTED, the crime prevention through environmental design. So, in looking at those things, we're looking at maintenance and stuff as well. So, anything that's going to collect and gather debris and things like that would just not beautify. It would actually work in transient. So, putting fences up and things like that aren't ideal for places like this because trash and debris gets caught up in that. So, some of the ideas that Rodney had looked up fit this CEPTED model of keeping it fairly maintenance-free for the city. So Rodney and his crew don't have to go down there and constantly be cleaning and doing the things for the bridges.
Well, and if the goal is to take the community negative and help, beautify these underneath the bridges, my opinion would be to involve the community and get it to turn into that positive. So it looks like it's probably the least expensive route, although it would take the longest, if I'm reading the chart correctly.
Yes, it would take some time to get the kids mobilized, to get it done,
But what greater community involvement
Absolutely.
yeah, so
I'm all for
that's my
it.
vote,
Yeah.
or my thought.
I have also run this by the Homeless Coalition, explained to them what concepts we are looking at doing. So from that committee, they are all for this. We see this also as a safety issue, not only for the people that are setting up shop under the bridges, but for the motorists going through. We've seen over the course of the last couple of months, cars stopping in the roadway to get out and provide items to these subjects. So, we're worried about people rear-ending cars, rubbernecking, looking at that distractedness that's there. So this is safety all the way around for us as well. It's not the most ideal place for someone to be homeless to be there as well. So, we're working on different avenues to help the homeless in that sense. So this just helps beautify and alleviates those safety concerns as well.
Sure.
And so to be clear, I appreciate the fact that you were couching this in terms of beautification, but the motivating factor is coming up with a method to provide a method for us to prevent what is going on now with the homeless people on the bridges, right? And this will achieve that goal.
Yep.
I don't want people out there to think, oh man, now they're gonna make the place pretty for these people. This would take care of that problem, and so it's like intercepting the ball and running back for a touchdown, not only getting rid of a problem, but making some beautification.
Yeah, the resulting sidewalk would just be enough for passage of people.
I'm a firm believer in doing whatever we can do with lighting. I think lighting is a wonderful way to beautify things. I see some of these examples in here, and unfortunately, they're probably a little expensive, but to the degree we can come up with some unique lighting techniques, at least under one of the bridges, I think would be a very positive thing. And I appreciate what you've all done. I think this is a perfect solution to the
Yeah,
issue.
thanks for such a creative idea.
Yeah. So the sidewalks, they'll still be 4 feet into the
Probably 5.
5 feet.
But then to be there, you'd be blocking.
Right.
Right.
It would just be for passage. Yes.
We like the
Panels, where you put do the panels and then hang them up as a mural, right?
Yes.
Right.
No.
No.
What do you like,
Big
Kristen?
no.
I like the No.
He wants the boulders.
Oh, me too.
No.
Me too, I think it's great.
No.
Decorative
Hard no.
river rock
You might
boulders.
need that for the Antietam area, though.
Right.
Antietam, that would be the quickest.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah,
People,
yeah.
there would be trash in it. I can't even imagine. No.
Well, the one thing, the ornamental fence, I didn't really like that idea because I could just see trash and paper bags and everything getting caught behind that and having to clean that out all the time.
Yeah, I think the boulders is a good solution on Antietam Street.
I think it looks
Either the
ridiculous.
Gabions or the pillars there, because
Right.
We're also proposing on, at least on Antietam Street, the grassy areas to either side of the bridges would have harsh vegetation, barberry bushes, rose bushes, things like that, so it would beautify it as well. And it would just add a nice ambiance to that. It wouldn't just be boulders. There would be landscaping on either side of that as well.
Oh, there you go.
So do I mean, you talked about safety issues, you know, does this create, I mean, this section, this little photo right here just looks like there could be potential safety issues
I
to
think the
me.
picture you're looking at there is not a bridge that's people
not-
wander past, and that's just, I think,
Oh.
more for stabilization than that picture, but that's just a representation. It'd be more of a jagged, like at least 100-pound boulder, something that couldn't be picked up and moved into the roadway, things like that.
And people couldn't get in there and hide, or
Right.
they could not?
They would stack, and it would be on an angle, so.
I mean, I don't like them.
I don't either, I think it looks ridiculous, but maybe I'm not,
But, yeah,
maybe I'm not envisioning in my head what,
I only,
The
yeah,
artist drawing
Maybe we
might
can
be
paint
throwing
them
you off a
purple.
little bit, so.
The
definitely.
difficulty here is you got so much space, though, you're gonna have to eat up that space with some type of
well, I'd rather
landscape.
get more creative than boulders. I mean,
Well, I
Maybe we
think if
saw
I think if you do boulders
different
along with
rendering.
landscaping, it's perfect.
You know, like,
I mean, you could focus the artsy portion on Franklin and those kind of areas that are heavily traveled by, you know, people coming in and going out of the city, to spruce them up. And I think Antietam Street's more of a utility street, that people utilize to.
it's the street that goes to City Park. It's not,
Ron,
I
do you
mean,
have any
Huh?
idea?
it goes to
why-
City, I mean, you go up there and turn right to go to City Park. It's not.
I never go down to Antietam to go to
With
city.
boulders,
Oh, how would you,
not with decorative river rock or, other than what he's describing. But it, I mean, it wouldn't look a lot different than that.
It wouldn't look a lot
I
different than
don't
that?
think so.
no,
Oh, no, no.
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 I mean, I personally don't like that, but,
I mean, what? I'm a no on that one. I don't.
I think River Rock is great. Kristen Lakes, River Rock, Austin.
We're just talking about Antietam Street.
Just Antietam Street?
Yeah.
can we see a different
May
picture
may I
of this?
suggest that we have the ability to get an artist rendition?
Thank you. I would-
Artist rendition of River
Yeah, so we
Rock.
can actually get a
Because this
a
is
little
not
better
helpful.
idea of what it actually would
But I
appear.
think that your idea of some plantings and things.
Well, and that would
break it
fit
up.
in with all this, to see if we could get
If I
some
could get a
type
better
of a
visual.
rendition.
We originally looked at harsh vegetation all the way through, but then it would require maintenance, because you're gonna have to give irrigation to the plants. You could do that all the way through there, but then it's
That's
gonna require that
more
additional
money.
irrigation. And maintenance by the city personnel to do that.
Yeah.
That's why you wouldn't wanna do any flowers under the bridge, or any kind of vegetation under the bridge.
Ronnie, is there any funding sources identified, because this was unbudgeted project?
No. I mean, the short answer to that's no. I guess we wanted to see what your thoughts were, and then we would work towards that.
Okay.
Because all these things would have to
I
come
think
back.
we need to do it, because I don't know of any other method to solve the problem that we have.
I see spending $6,000 on Antietam.
It's the cheapest possible thing we could come up with, to be frank.
Yeah. And we can, like as I said, we can focus on the other bridges with more elaborate schemes and.
Right? You could paint up different colors.
The rocks?
Oh, my gosh.
But they look like the building.
He is not allowed to draw the picture either, so.
So you want a better rendering of that? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, with
for-
the landscaping, so we would get a
Okay.
picture of
For Antietam.
an idea of what it really would be like.
Yeah.
And then do you like the mural
Yes.
concept for either Franklin or Washington? I guess the only question I have is, how many murals can we get done as a community? Can we, engage all the middle schools
In a
or
school
high
year?
schools? Yeah.
If you're gonna do lighting.
Well, you know
I like-
Western
I would
Heights
like
is
the
in.
lighting over near the Little Caesars one. What is that?
Church Street?
Yes.
Yeah, it's-
I just think that that bridge is in much more desperate need of lighting,
yeah.
Than
Just
the
replacing
other
the wall
two.
packs might be.
I think replacing the wall packs there would be the
Yeah, it'll be
solution.
huge difference if we
Yeah,
can get that.
and that's
Just
basically
getting
free.
that done. I mean, those
City Light will take care of it.
high-intensity LEDs are really, make a difference.
The hardy
Middle
board
one
panels
for murals and
for the murals, is that gonna deteriorate?
No, it's like a cement board.
Okay.
So like the mural that's down here is on hardy board, and it looks just as good as the day it was put up there 10 years, 15 years ago.
Okay.
I mean, it has a life, but it would be, you know, 10, 15, 20 years at least.
I know we would just keep changing those out as
Yeah.
different classes came up with different projects.
Whenever they got tired, you just replace them.
How long will it take you to get the rendering of the artist rendering of River Rock and,
A week.
okay, so we'll see you next Tuesday?
I'll do my best. If not, the fall.
And in
I mean, the
answer,
FBI can do a whole investigation in a week, Rodney, come
That's what I've
on.
heard.
in answer to to your question about how long it would take the schools, have you spoken with any of the schools about this project?
Yep, Rodney and I met with Western Heights and Northern Middle last year about something different but very similar, and they were 100% on board.
Did they happen to say how long it would take?
No, but they were even willing to do something over the summer, like with their art students, with a group of students who wanted to participate in something like this, so they're willing to make it work, for sure.
Just the logistics of this is so much better, because they can work in their classroom.
Yeah,
And then take the
we were
panels
talking
to the
about
site.
them having to come out and
Oh,
like
okay.
Yeah.
actually paint.
Is the mural done on Memorial?
It's being done.
They're gonna do it this
soon.
weekend.
Yeah.
I think it's finally stopped raining long enough to do that.
Yeah,
Was pray, it stays
They
that way,
tried.
right?
Right, they've tried several times.
yeah.
Okay.
And just, I'm just thinking out loud, okay? I'm just thinking about, I know the railroads are a joke, so to ask them to think about doing something, but I'm thinking about the professional sports teams in Maryland, and whether they would be interested in having team logo panels donated, something along those lines. I mean, you're sitting here with two professional football teams, two professional baseball teams, professional hockey team, who all make contributions to communities, and I'm not saying on all the bridges, but I could see one of the bridges being a sports bridge, where you would have contributions by those teams, but just thinking out loud.
Okay.
So
Look
we
forward
just-
to the
So
artist
rendering for
rendering
Antietam
of
Street,
the-
and then we'll pursue the
River Rock.
murals on
Because no one knows
Antietam,
what
I'm
we'll
sorry,
see.
on Franklin and Washington, or some sort of themed thing like
Fantastic.
that. Okay. So we'll do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I do have one question though, Chief, maybe you can answer for me. According to, and Paul Falk's sitting in the back, he could probably answer this a little bit better, along with you. According to city code, at least a 3-foot, Kathy, right? I know I have your email in there somewhere.
Yes.
I'm
Yes,
looking for
3
it.
feet, that's 3 feet for sidewalks.
For ADA and also in our streets and sidewalks code.
Yeah. So are we adhering to that all over the city by any chance?
As much as we can. yeah.
Okay, much as we can?
I mean, if there's incidents that we're not told about, then we don't. If you're speaking about the lady under the bridge under Prospect Street, we could move her again, but she's gonna probably wind up someplace where we don't want her to be. And so we're trying to keep her maintaining there as much as we can. We go there at least once a week, try to remove as much of the stuff that people drop off to her, which is the biggest problem with her, is that the community keeps bringing her more and more stuff, which keeps her from having to go to the services to get the things that she needs. So the biggest problem here is when helping's hurting. And so we've had staff monitoring her, going up there as much as we can throughout the week and removing excess stuff that she's had there is building up as best we can. So can't make her move anywhere else. If I move her from there, she's going to probably move further into downtown. And we're going to be dealing with those issues. So the lesser of evils here is what we're looking at when it comes to her severe mental illness. I don't really have an answer for her. So I can tell you that no prosecutor or no judge is gonna put her in jail. So it's just not gonna happen. So we could charge her every day of the week, and she's gonna be right back where she's at every day of the
The
week.
commissioner is gonna release her on recall also.
So
Well, it's not like that doesn't happen for other crimes too, but yeah.
No, understood.
But I mean, but with her,
the chief's problem.
that's the
Well, you know,
issue.
winter's coming, that's my fear.
Right, and if it gets cold enough, she will go to the REACH shelter if she gets cold enough, but we're trying to monitor her, we're working to try to find family. There's a lady here in town that actually approached us that said that they know her from years ago. She doesn't know if she remembers her. She says she has a place for her, so we're trying to convince her to go with this lady here in town. So we are working every avenue we can with her. The problem is that she's that far gone that services, she doesn't want the help, and the community's helping her. They're giving her everything she needs to survive.
Right.
And more. So I implore the community to, you want to give her food, stop and give her a meal for that day, for that moment. You want to give her water for that moment. Don't bring cases of water, don't bring food, don't bring canned hams, don't bring things that she's never going to use. Don't bring luggage and furniture. You're not helping her, you're actually hurting her. She's not attending and going to any services. She never has to leave that spot. So it's Walmart delivering to your house when you make the phone call is essentially what's happening here.
Sure.
So I really implore any of you that go out and speak to the community the same thing. Tell people if they want to help, give her that immediate need, but push her towards the services. There's plenty of services here that'll give her the help. You can get a hot meal in the city every day of the week.
Yep.
So, so we're working, we're trying. We're
I know you
trying
are,
to-
Jim.
trying
I
to get her-
appreciate it.
And there'll
Trying to
be
get
a
her the help
plan
that she
for
needs.
her when these mural, I mean, like there'll be, like, move, if she doesn't move, if this starts sooner than later, is there going to be an effort on how to get her to understand what's happening?
Well, currently, she's under the Prospect Dry Bridge, so
Okay.
she's not under
She's
anything,
not
she's not
under-
under any of these
okay.
bridges here.
Okay.
We fenced these off temporarily.
She was under
Okay.
this bridge, but the danger there was, we've had several car accidents where cars have wound up in that area because of the intersection accidents we've had there. So we were never happy with her being there for the safety reasons. So that was one of the big reasons
Okay.
we had to get her out of there, get her moved. That's, again, back to the safety concerns. At least on the Prospect Street Bridge, by the time you see her, you're already going by her. So traffic-wise, we're not getting people stopping in the roadway.
Okay.
It is a concern about blocking, that's why we keep going up there as much as we can to get her to move the stuff back, keep it contained, and then remove it as necessary. So, but again, I implore the community, stop bringing her so much stuff. You're not helping her.
Right. Okay, thank you,
Thank you.
Chief.
Sure.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Rodney.
Thank you, Rodney.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Licensing of hotels.
Good afternoon. I'm here with my very shy compadres who are in the back of the room, the fire department, and
Yeah.
other
Everyone
folks
sits
from
up
code
front.
administration. Also here are interested parties from the Chamber, the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and the Bowman Group from Hospitality, and the Homewood Suites Hotel. So, I, as well as my team in the back of the room, are back following up from the February meeting that we had where we talked about the possibility of licensing hotels. The concern at that time, which kind of grew out of our experience with the Garden Plaza Hotel, was that some hotels, the maintenance is falling below codified standards for fire safety and property maintenance, the lack of training of staff on fire protection, emergency incidents and evacuation standards. And then another factor of concern for us is that we're aware that there are several hotels in town that are not designed to be extended stay hotels, but that are functioning that way for the local population, and that's of concern for us. And then the other issue is that, at least in the case of the Garden Plaza Hotel, they're not in good standing on the county hotel tax, and we've had issues with them on property tax and utilities. So for us, it's importance to make sure that the hotels are in good standing on all of those obligations. And so, after that meeting, you set us loose to try to figure out what would be a strategy that we could explore if we were to license hotels. And so we visited a variety of communities. We conferred with CVB staff, the county treasurer, went out and met with Homewood Suite staff just to see how a real extended stay hotel functions, and also to learn their concerns about what we were trying to do. and then got back together to try to figure out, the fire staff and the code administration staff, on what would be a way to handle this that would not be heavy-handed on the hotels that we're not worried about, but would be a fair system to get at the hotels that we are concerned about. So what we developed was a tiered strategy, and the goal being those hotels that fall into the tier 1 would be basically getting the same city attention that they get now, an annual fire and marshal inspection. The difference being that now there would be a license fee. And then, so that would be for the newer hotels that have been recently substantially rehabilitated and also are functioning at a high level. Tier 2 would be the older hotels that have not been renovated, hotels that are older than 12 years old, or it's been more than 12 years since they were renovated. In most cases, it's well over 20 years since the older hotels have been renovated. In a Tier 2 category, you would add in planning and code administration as an inspection in addition to the annual fire marshal inspection. And then Tier 3, those are the hotels that don't have a brand. So they don't even have oversight from their hotel complex kind of community, or they're poor performers. So in that category, it would be twice a year for the fire marshal and the code administration staff. And so I'll go through this as well. The other thing we did was we created definitions to create minimum standards for extended stay. If you're going to have people stay in your hotel for more than 30 days, then you need to provide a level of service with those units for people to live there an extended period of time. Having a mini fridge or not is not good enough if you're going to have a family living in there, which is, we do have that in some cases. And so, just quickly run through this. So for Tier 1, the goal would be if the hotel is under a chained brand, they're in good standing with their chain, there are no valid complaints about the hotel from the public to the city, the hotel is fully sprinklered with fire alarm protection, and all of the hotels except the Garden Plaza are fully sprinklered and fire alarmed. And the hotel has been constructed or had substantial renovations in the last 12 years. And in this kind of category, what would fall into Tier 1 would be the Homewood Suites, the Hampton Inn, both of which, within the last 12 years, substantial renovation. Homewood Suites right now, Hampton Inn 5 years ago, and then the hotel that's currently under renovation on Railway Lane. Tier 2, the hotel is under a chained brand. They're still in good standing with their chain, but they are not fully sprinklered or fully fire alarmed, and it has not been constructed within the last 12 years or had substantial renovations in the last 12 years. 12 years will give you 4 code cycles in terms of the updates to all the codes, so it's what we figured, 12 years. And then Tier 3.
Examples?
For those, we would, part of the issue is not knowing what the standards are for the ones that are doing the extended stay that are not designed for it. But if we assume that the ones that were not designed for extended stay are not doing extended stay, then, and they're all in good standing with their chains, and we don't have any valid complaints, then Tier 2 would be basically everybody but the Garden Plaza Hotel and those that fall into Tier 1. And unless we find out that, and that's our suspicion, particularly the hotels clustered around Eastern and the Dual Highway, that they're doing extended stay, but they weren't designed for that.
Now, you have in there, if the hotel hasn't been constructed or had substantial renovations in the last 12 years, but it is fully sprinklered with fire alarm protection, would that still be a Tier 2?
Yeah.
Tier 1 only makes them newer.
Right. At
And
newer
fully
or
sprinklered.
substantially renovated.
Well,
Newer.
Yeah, they definitely would be, a newer one, they would be automatically fully
Exactly.
sprinklered. Yeah. Because the newer ones are meeting modern codes. And then Tier 3, they don't operate under a chained brand, or they're not in good standing with their chain. There are valid complaints about the hotel, like we were getting with the Garden Plaza. The hotel is not fully sprinkled with fire alarm protection, or the hotel has not been constructed or substantially renovated in the past 12 years. This is basically the category 4. We've got complaints. They're not operating under a chain brand, so there's no external oversight from a commercial entity. And then for, we've added in, after discussions on the staff team, bed and breakfasts and short-term rentals. Currently, we do not have any bed and breakfasts in the city, but we know that we do have somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 or 10 short-term rentals, Airbnb kinds of units. And so we're suggesting that they should also be covered. Currently, right now, the opinion we've gotten from the city attorney is if we know of a situation where the entire unit is being leased, we're sending them notifications that they need to be in the rental licensing program. But there are some situations where people just lease out a room
Can you
in
give
the
us an
Airbnb.
example of the Airbnb? You say you know of 8 or 10 of them.
Right,
Are
if
we
you go to
talking
the-
mainly like small apartment buildings, or are we talking about larger places you know of that?
We haven't called the numbers, but if you go to the Airbnb site, and then you look up Hagerstown, and then you pull up the little maps that they show you to figure out, is this the city, or is this, somewhere in the greater postal zone for Hagerstown? There were 8 or 10, but the map doesn't give you, they don't give you an address, and sometimes the photograph is just the inside of the unit. But they'll give you a little blurb, or a little blob, and so the little blobs that I was looking at, 8 or 10 of them are in the city. The only identifiable unit was the Queen Anne house down by City Park, because they provided a photo of the exterior of the house. And if anybody was gonna do an Airbnb, that would be a beautiful place to do it. But otherwise, they're just pictures of the inside of the unit, so you can't really tell where the property is unless you were to call them up and say, where is this unit? But we didn't do that at this point. We just know that there are between 8 and 10 Airbnbs in the city. And we know of one for sure that's up in Cortland Manor that is now in the rental licensing program, because we received complaints from the neighbors.
And one looks like it's an Oak Hill.
But there were 3 of them advertised in the Locust Point area, so you just don't know where you're gonna find these things.
The Airbnb
Uh-huh.
in Locust Point area. Huh,
Just in case you want to get away.
yeah.
For the
Well, I like Locust Point, I mean,
For the bed and breakfast and the short-term rentals, because those are going into existing dwelling units, we're suggesting if they're part of the hotel licensing program, that before they come into the program, they should be inspected to see that they comply with the property maintenance code. So that'd be like sort of, and that happens, and then you apply for the program. And then also, to be in a tier 1, so you pass the property maintenance code to be in tier 1, they have no valid complaints about the property. The property is fully sprinklered with fire alarm protection. So if someone was gonna propose to do a new B&B in the city, that would have to happen, because it'd be a change of use from a dwelling unit to a B&B. So currently, we don't have any, so it's not an issue. We used to have 2 in the city, but they closed up years ago. And then, property has been constructed or had substantial renovation in the last 12 years, just like with the hotels. So that, we're suggesting for those 2 types of facilities, that's tier 1. Tier 2, it complies with the property maintenance code. There are no valid complaints about the property, but it's not fully sprinklered or having fire alarm protection. So that would be for the existing Airbnb units. Most likely, they don't have sprinklers, I would guess. I'd put good money on it. And then the property has not been constructed or substantially renovated in the last 12 years. And then for tier 3, the property did not comply with the property maintenance code. There are valid complaints, just like with a hotel categorization, and it was not constructed or rehabilitated within the last 12 years. For the fee structure, this is what we're proposing and we looked at all other types of fees that are out there, either charged by the state fire marshal or for other communities with their hotel programs. And we compared that against an existing hotel to see what kind of a number are we talking about, because we didn't want it to get too out of control. And so we were suggesting for tier 1, $75 per facility plus $5 per guest room. And for tier 2, since you're getting twice as much attention from the city, doubling that. And then for tier 3, since you're getting twice a year, 2 departments inspecting you, again, a higher number. For the inspection schedule, tier 1, it's the same as you get now, an annual fire marshal inspection.
Now, is there a fee right now being charged for these?
No.
I have
So
no
what-
interest in charging tier 1 a fee.
Why would
Me
we
either.
charge tier 1 a fee if we're doing the same thing and we're not charging a fee?
What
now?
we're proposing with this is that all the revenue generated would be forwarded to the fire marshal, for the fire department, as another way to raise revenue for the fire marshal's office, because there's a desire there to increase staffing. They're a little short-staffed, and they do not have very many revenue-generating opportunities in that department.
Can you just
So that's
increase
why
that
we
tier 2
proposed it.
fee?
Yeah, I think you'll find the opposition to tier 1 fee is my guess.
Can you just increase the tier 2 fee to cover, like, just another $5 for? Instead of
We can do
Yeah, I'm just
whatever. This
saying,
is
in
just
order
what we
to-
suggested
Or
to
tier
you.
3
We
fee.
realized.
Yeah, to whatever. Yeah, or tier 3 fee.
Further see the tier 3 fee.
Yeah, I concur.
Right.
Um, I don't want to discourage B&Bs as we develop the city and we have houses that are restored and people want to create B&Bs, 3 or 4 bedrooms or whatever. I don't want to, if they fall into tier 2, I mean, an older house, it's not going to be fully sprinklered, it's not going to be fully alarmed probably.
If someone were to create a B&B, because we don't have any currently, they would have to do those things in order to get
They would have to
to get a
sprinkle.
UNO.
Like a real one.
They would have to bring,
Not the air.
No.
yeah,
a
the real
real-
ones.
A real B&B.
They would have to bring them up to code.
So
Okay.
are you
Because
talking
it-
about the Airbnbs or
No,
the
no,
bed and
if
breakfast?
somebody
Okay.
wants a real traditional, one of the nicer old homes, to convert it to a
Like
bed
we
and
used to have with
breakfast.
Windgrove Manor and Sundays. Those were real B&Bs.
Yeah.
And I think since there are so few Airbnbs, it would be easy to implement that
And
now.
most of them look like they're renting rooms versus homes.
Yeah.
I just
Well,
on the
Airbnbs
website.
get out of hand real quick because you
Well,
can't.
you had a terrible experience,
Yeah,
didn't you? Yeah. But I think it's easier to implement this kind of thing now when we, before it gets out of control, before that movement does.
I agree though about tier 1. I don't think we should charge tier 1 a
Yeah,
fee.
I
Because
don't
we want to
either.
encourage that type of hotel to be here and discourage the tier 3, the ones acting as homes.
So, 2 items here. One is, I guess the 2 that I'm most concerned about. One is the Lisa rooms for extended stay for a hotel that's not designed for that purpose. Like for me, through all of the process of discussion and deliberation and ones we've investigated and had issues with, that to me seems to be like the most paramount issue, whether it's public safety, whether it's marketability, you name it. That to me seems to be sort of the sticking issue that degrades, the entire hotel process locally. So for me, whatever we do here, I think that needs to be a primary focus. And you say for the revocation of a license, I guess I'd like to understand how you're going to make that determination. That someone is using it for that purpose, or has been there for a duration that meets those parameters.
Yeah, that will be a challenge. It'll be apparent on the inspections if we do the inspections and the room is packed full of someone's lifelong belongings, that would be one clue. We might get complaints, we might get expressions of concern that this is going on, and if it's being inspected, we'll pick that up. But that would be one of the challenging things. If it's happening and no one's complaining about it and it's not being observed in an inspection.
Well, I think a number of these places, though, no one's complaining about it because the entire place is being used in that manner. And that's a problem that I have. I mean, you got a hotel and 30% of it is not occupied, and the other 70% that is occupied by individuals who are utilizing the rooms in a long-term stay manner for rooms that were clearly not designed that way. The utilities aren't designed for that purpose, to absorb, just something as simple as the grease from meals a day, being discarded. And then the other issue for me that's big is the payment of the hotel motel tax. And so I'm just curious whether we do have the ability to revoke the license for someone that isn't in arrears for a tax that isn't ours.
Although it's a tax we benefit from.
I mean, it's a tax we benefit from, but we're not the collecting entity. So I'm just curious whether we have the legal capability to revoke a license for something that we're not the authority over.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
that's
the
just-
first initial brush by the city attorney it didn't jump out as an issue of concern, but we would certainly would have to
Okay.
have her give us a full researched response on that.
Okay. And then the only other item I'd note in here is, and I feel like, I feel like all these discussions are discussions related to the quality of housing stock. And I don't see this as a lot different within the city. And so I feel like this is sort of this version's discussion of the rental issue that we were having, and we were able to sort of work with those entities to come up with a mechanism and a program that sort of met both what the city's trying to do and prevent it from being imposing on those entities that are simply attempting to do business in an upstanding manner. And so I'm trying to limit that impact to them as much as possible when I read through this, and I'll give you an example. Under the fee and inspection schedule, I agree, tier 1, I don't see the necessity, but under point 8, it says, if the building trade or life safety violations of chapter 64 are observed by the fire marshal or reported to the city, the hotel drops to a tier 2. And when I read that, the first thing I think is it shouldn't be that way. It should be, if it's observed or reported, they get, X period to correct, and that's the end of it. And they stay in tier 1. In other words, if there's a violation, somebody should be given the opportunity, the owner should be given the opportunity to take corrective action before they automatically get demoted, into a tier that they didn't mean to,
Again,
by
give me
that
an
activity
example,
land.
like where we had the issue with the Garden Plaza Hotel.
Mhm.
The fire marshal's office did the inspection. They observed a couple of locations, or however many locations it was, where there was property maintenance code. My office was invited in to explore just those identified locations of the fire marshal. We did not look at the hotel. Who knows, if we'd seen the hotel, there would have been an even longer
Right.
haul things. We might still be inspecting what we've discovered, months ago. But because we don't, my department only gets into a hotel if we are called in because of a complaint. And in that situation, we were called in to look at these, however many
Right.
number of rooms was, rather than looking at the entire facility. So it's just, for us, it would just have been a spot solution, whereas there might have been a whole host of issues throughout the hotel.
And I get that there's those more obvious and extreme cases. I'm talking about the instance, because when you read this very literally, it literally reads that if someone owning and operating a hotel, if a building trade or life safety violation, that encompasses a very broad list of things of Chapter 64, or observed by the fire marshal, which again encompasses a very broad list of things. If they violate even one of those, they drop down. That doesn't seem the way that this is.
should be given time
Let's say
to
we give them
fix
60
it.
days to correct it.
Yeah.
If they're not
Yes.
correcting in 60
No
days,
corrective
then we're
action.
dropping them down. If
Yeah.
they correct it in 60 days.
Yeah, because those things could happen all the time. And you'd say, hey, got this new issue, and the owner could go, oh, thanks for letting me know. Bam, 45 days, it's fixed, and okay, the issue's done.
I agree with that. I do too.
I just think that
Thank
that's
you, Paul, for chiming in.
a simpler process.
You could actually come to the table, Paul.
I know.
He's good.
I'm no taker.
And then finish this if you don't mind. For tier 2, it would be still the annual fire marshal inspection, but also annual peak out inspection is what proposed. And tier 3, every 6 months for both departments. And currently, the fire marshal does an annual inspection without this program. For suspending the license, that would be a case of the property has not corrected the code violations in the time frames provided by the fire marshal or by my department, whoever it was. And the property in that case, as long as it's not a really dangerous situation, the hotel could remain open while they're dealing with it, just couldn't bring in new guests. That's what we're proposing as a suspension. Keep functioning with the way you're currently operating. No new guests until you get all fixed up. And then revoking is, you just don't get to it at all. And so we revoke in that situation, or they're not in good standing with the hotel motel tax. They're not in good standing on property taxes for the city and the county, not in good standing on utility bills for the city, and they're not in compliance with the extended stay standards. They don't have that mini kitchen in the room. They don't have enough room for the number of people they're packing into the rooms, that kind of stuff. Property is a chronic nuisance property. Property has severe code violations that they didn't get to. in the time frames that staff prescribed, and then the property's license has been in a suspended state for 6 months with no resolution to the problems. That's what we were suggesting for, at that point, a license would be revoked and the hotel would need to shut down.
So, this is my concern. I understand needing to have a safe place, and I understand like the people at Garden Plaza, for example, were not living in a standard that is acceptable or safe. But if it comes to a point where we revoke a license, is the outcome of that going to be worse? Because there were a lot of families there, and there are, unfortunately, in the city, there are a lot of families right now living in hotels. I mean, we have bus stops at hotels for kids to go to. So what are the consequences of this? And I understand the consequences of not doing it and life safety issues. But on the flip side of that, in the worst case scenario, do we have a plan? Have we reached out to like CAC and so, because I know it costs thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars when Garden Plaza closed for that short amount of time. Like, I just want to make sure that us making this decision isn't going to make consequences worse, because we just had a whole meeting about how to fix homeless people under a bridge.
What we're proposing is that currently we don't allow rooming houses in the city, which is another sort of a safety net housing alternative that the city used to have many, and old cities around the city, country all had many rooming houses. It was an entry level way into the housing market. You've gone off the farm, you're going into the factory, you start out in a rooming house. Or if you're falling on hard times, you might drop down into a rooming house. We currently don't allow them because we had some badly managed ones and we weren't happy about it. But we're proposing right now with land management code amendments that the Planning Commission just had their hearing last month. Things will be coming to you probably late October, early November, proposing to allow rooming houses in the RO district, the RH district, the CG district, which is where some of these old funky hotels are, and the and outside the A&E district section of the downtown, but with certain parameters, like you have to have someone on site 24 hours a day representing the owner. You have to have a contract with a nonprofit to provide self-sufficiency counseling, because the goal would be that help them figure out how to get out of a rooming house and into a regular dwelling. And just parking, things like that, but just trying to, because we were aware that this was possibly coming, we have to have a solution for, well, if not a hotel, where else can you go?
Right, yeah. I just think that that's an important aspect right now, because whether we like to admit it or not, I mean, it is the reality of where we're at right now, and there are a lot of people there because it's their only option, and their next option might be a bridge. So I just would hate to have those consequences with something that has the best of intentions.
Right.
I think recognizing though that could become a possibility though, I would never want to sit here and say to staff on either the code side or life safety side that the solution be to allow folks to remain in place in a situation where you've identified life safety or health, safety, and welfare violations. In other words, to me, if, let's say, that the sewer, portion of the room doesn't work in 7 of those places you inspect, I would certainly hope that we wouldn't look to staff and say, well, the folks can remain there until, you know what I mean, until an alternative can be established, because I think then that opens, in other words, it's never a liability until you as staff identify it. And then once you've identified, you have a responsibility to act upon that identification and that code directive.
I don't disagree, I just think we need to have a plan. There's gonna have to be a partnership between entities, if that were the case. I mean, we can't just say, here, go live on the street.
Well, and the other thing though is, I'm assuming that there's a step-up process. I mean, here you identify sort of the step-down process. I'm assuming that this also works in reverse. That once an entity, let's say a violation occurs, and for whatever reason, a location gets placed in that tier 2. I'm assuming that you go out the next time, everything is, all checks out, that they automatically get put back up in tier 1 and things start over.
If they're in the tier 2 because it's been 12 years or more since it was built or substantially renovated, it would stay in the tier 2 until that until they renovated, the way it's proposed.
That seems odd.
You mean if you are a tier 1 and you get a violation, you go to a tier 2 because you didn't fix your violation in 60 days or whatever, is there a way to get back to a tier 1?
Oh yeah, if you were a tier 1, then that means you were built within the last 12 years or substantially renovated in the last 12 years. For some reason, you dropped into the tiers, you deal with those issues, you would very easily go back.
So everything
to tier 1.
hinges on, as a tier 2, the renovation and how the
Same as like you're in a tier 3, because you don't have a chain or you're bad standing with your chain. You could get up to a 2 if you cleared all that stuff up
I got you.
and
Okay.
didn't have any valid complaints anymore.
So it's the renovation is the 12-year, the way to get past the 12-year rule. Okay.
I was going to join the conversation just to provide some assurance to Mayor and Council that it's been my observation in 3 years here that not only the fire marshal staff, but Kathy and code enforcement staff do a really excellent job in identifying issues that I would declare are immediately dangerous to life and health. In those things, we would not provide 30 days, blocked exits, sewage discharge, these kind of things. We could name any number of examples, but they work tirelessly to provide alternatives for those people rather than just an eviction or a revocation of license or whatever. So I think that those issues are the exception and not the rule, and that you have to have some faith in staff of both Kathy's department, my department, to exercise appropriate judgment there and determine what is immediately dangerous to life and health. And I think the intent of this, Kathy did an excellent job laying out the intent of where we're trying to get. When you fall farther down that tier structure, then action's required. It really is, to prevent what occurred at Garden Plaza over a long period of time, and it clearly Mayor Council was unhappy with, and we took corrective actions there.
Yeah, I feel like that one sort of got there because no one was watching.
That's right.
In other words, this type of activity would have caught that long before it got to 30 or 40 units being in that manner, long before it got to 7 or 8 exits being in that manner, long before it got to 6 or 7 employees not having those minimum, standards of operation. I feel like this type of activity would have caught that, and it wouldn't have got to that point where then you're looking at having to relocate, a mass volume of individuals all in one instance because the whole place was, arguably not inhabitable.
We were flirting with cold weather at that time, as you recall. And, it's very complex issues. I would just simply request that whatever the final language of this looks like, that we have that option for immediately dangerous to life and health. Whatever those things are, we'll try to correct them 24 hours or immediately move a hot plate away from curtains, any of those kind of things that we know are going to end tragically sooner or later.
Oh, yeah, I remember going to Venice.
That's right. But some of the stuff we've seen is, when they're cooking in bathrooms in a motel room.
Which is not sanitary.
For a variety of reasons.
And for a long time.
Yes. And as Kathy identified, all their worldly belongings are either in our automobile or a motel room. That's a clue.
We have, within the last day or so, received a letter from the Bowman Group, which was emailed to everyone here. And the bottom line of it is that they're requesting that we either refrain from implementing this program for this additional government oversight, particularly in hotels that are very high functioning and in great standing with their chain, or exempt those hotels from the extra level of reporting if they are in good standing with their corporate brand requirements. We tried to set this up to take into consideration corporate brand requirements, but that can't be shared with us. So it's hard for us to say, oh, okay, that would meet our requirements because it's proprietary information for the chains.
Yeah, I feel like when we went through this most recent iteration of the rental program update, that it was more beneficial for us as a body to have the program that staff sort of proposes and then hear from opposing individuals of those specific items within that proposal that they had, you know, the most consternation with.
I
And
think
and be
that-
able to sort of massage those to a degree that, you know, still meets what we're trying to reach and addresses those concerns.
I think you have people in the audience that will be happy to provide you input right this evening.
I think that we set up specific parameters, though, when we did that, for folks to speak.
Yes, we did.
I mean, that we had two public, you
Yes, we
know,
did.
meetings set up specifically for that purpose.
That was helpful.
Which was helpful for me to sort
Very
of write it
helpful.
down, then go back, talk to those individuals, you know, review the program and whittle it down from there. But I'm open to whatever.
I don't know, my comment would be, I don't know what opposition we would receive if the direction that the council's saying is seeking no fee for a tier one, keeping it exactly the same as it currently is. That's the direction that the council is pursuing, that we've heard multiple times. I don't know if there would be opposition from parties that we've heard from.
I thought that's what we already decided as well.
Generally,
That's what
yes.
that's what I say,
There's 3 votes.
is to eliminate the tier one,
Fee.
or what a
Then
tier,
eliminate the tier
yeah.
one fee. There's-
Tier one fee.
And have you not dropped to 2, but just because there was chapter
Right.
64 violations, if you can get them
Correct.
fixed up in 60 days.
You're gonna kill the fee, address number 8,
Or whatever time frame you see fit.
and the other stuff you say is already happening. Right?
Other stuff.
Fire marshal.
Do you mean the
Yeah.
fire?
The annual
Yeah.
fire marshal
Right.
inspection,
Okay,
yes.
that's
Yes.
already happened.
And I'd be fine if number 8 said 120 days. I just think that 60 days is too short.
Well, on number 8, that's in tier one, so we're eliminating that, so.
Number 8
I
on
didn't
what,
think we were
what
eliminating
page?
it.
No,
Well,
right.
you
I
know
thought we
what
were
mean.
saying
If a
you
tier,
have
if
to
a
correct
tier
it
Yeah.
one has safety violations and it wasn't corrected, then
The only 8, that's
within
the only
120 days. I mean,
fall
I have no
under
problem
tier
with that.
I'm just saying to
Yeah.
line up a contractor.
Which page is your number 8?
Has to
Right
be.
here, on tier one.
Tier
Three.
1
number
fee
Okay.
inspection schedule.
Page 3.
Yeah, page
So
3.
you were saying you'd be fine if that said if you can't get it resolved in 20 days, then it would drop to 2? That would, okay.
I would say hotel may drop to tier 2. I mean, there may be extenuating circumstances that.
I mean, it could be because
Staff and that owner work it
of
out.
mitigating, or circumstances beyond the hotel's control. They can't fix
Right.
whatever it is until,
Right.
you know, it's winter time and they can't do it until spring.
Fundamentally, I'm okay with that, but my concern would be any of those issues that would fall under that very narrow category
We
immediately.
understand
Yeah, I think that gets beyond our
I don't think
control.
we're talking about hot plates being hot purpose.
That's basic fire,
Yeah.
safety code, that's a different story.
I don't think we're gonna find that in the tier one hotels anyway, so.
Okay, why don't we, what was your goal here, Kathy, to adopt this at the end of the month?
No, this was your first chance to see the recommended strategy. We were looking for your input,
Okay.
and then we would take it back.
Do you
So
still wanna have a
regroup.
meeting with an open discussion?
I think we should open it for
I do too.
hear
To
the counterparts that are, anybody
Yeah.
that wants to. And I'm sure we're gonna hear from some tier 3 people too.
Sure.
Let's
That'd
give
be great.
people the opportunity to digest it a little bit with corrections or with the changes. And do maybe a meeting in the 3rd week of October and then one like the 2nd week of November. And then if we have it all ironed out and everybody's happy, then we can push for the end
We
of,
have, we only have 9 hotels in the city. Might be able to do it with one meeting.
might be able to. Let's not be too, yeah.
We can send letters out to all of them like we did with the rental licensing, and I think with 9 letters, I mean, one property, one owner of a hotel owns 2 of the hotels, so I think.
And building a 3rd.
Well, no, it's a.
That is the second.
They're building a second, and so there's only a few hotel owners in town. We could probably handle it.
Yeah, but let's not roll out.
In the list in our packet of the hotels in Hagerstown, I don't see the Dagmar.
It's a rooming house.
It's a rooming house?
Part of it was okay.
I thought it was part.
Well, they get inspected now, though.
Right, in the rental licensing program.
They're under the landlord rental
All of the
registration
units
now.
fall under that?
No, because didn't they rename it? It's not the Dagmar anymore, it's
It's the
the
Crown.
Crown Hotel or
Really?
something? Yes.
They're in
That's
the
my
middle of
check
trying to do a
you get
renovation
online
project
anyway.
on their upper floors for
That's
6 and
right.
7 floors to be a hotel. They have not completed that project, so it is still listed as a rooming house with our office.
It's apparently been a goal for a little while. Just haven't gotten it.
Okay. Any other thing for Steve, Kathy, or Paul? Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
City administrators comments?
Nothing this evening, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Shelley?
No, sir.
Lou?
No, thank you.
Austin?
Just one thing I've noticed last couple of weeks, there seems to be, I don't know for what reason, furniture being dropped off in front of people's houses, and they can't get rid of it. And, I mean, they can get rid of it by paying a fee, but I don't know if there's any way to help in that situation. I don't know what you're supposed to do if somebody drops a couch off in your side yard. Do you put it in the street so that the city will take it away, or pay the $25 to have it hauled away because somebody dropped it off?
Thought it was 50.
I forget what it is. Maybe it's 50. But anyway, it seems to, I don't know why, it seems to be the latest issue.
Gasoline in a match in my house,
Yeah, it could be that too.
right in the driveway.
The fire marshal is here, you can't see that.
We can look into that maybe? Good, okay. All right. Kristen?
Just wanted to thank all the folks involved with making the, I want to get the term right, Thunder in the Square event. This past weekend, it was a good time, and got to see a lot of cars. I think my dad's car got an award for something. I'm not into old cars, so anyway, it was good.
That sounds rigged to me.
I think it was rigged.
Just if anyone is hungry, from now until 11 o'clock tonight, Green Turtle is donating 20% of their sales to Washington Goes Purple. So if you guys want to have dinner or drinks tonight, please head to Green Turtle and say you're there for Washington Goes Purple.
All right. I don't have anything, so we're adjourned.